Okay, so I'm here in southeast London. I'm about to chat with Steve White, aka the legend that is Whitey. Yeah, pretty excited. He doesn't really need an introduction, but he's been playing drums a long time. But you will know him from the Style Council, Paul Weller, John Lorde, Trio Valore, Family Silver, kind of the list goes on, and I'm really excited to ask him a few questions and get to talk to him, so let's do it. Okay, Steve, hi, thanks so much for talking to me.
Absolute pleasure.
Okay, can I just start by asking how old you were when you started the drums and why?
I saw a Boys Brigade band walking down a street in Lewisham where we used to live, and I just loved the racket. I thought it sounded incredible. The drums were leading, drums and bugles, and the drums were at the front, and I just thought that just sounds fantastic. And then one of my uncles had a snare drum that he'd bought at a very young age, didn't really know what to do with it, and I kind of inherited it and just managed to, just keep playing, and then joined the Boys Brigade to learn to play the drums, and that was it. And that was when I was about 8.
Wow.
And after that, my dad bought me a copy of Let There Be Drums by Sandy Nelson, and one of the guys that was working with him, a labourer called Gary, lent me 2 albums. One was The Wailing Buddy Rich, and the other was called The Kings of Percussion with Louis Bellson, Buddy and Gene Krupa, and that was it. I just used to sit and listen to those records forever.
So your career, okay, fast forward, well, not many years, because as we said earlier, by the time you were gigging really quite quickly and very young.
I was gigging from about 14 when I you used to have to go to the Musicians Union, which was at Cheltenham football stadium, and in one of the bars there, and they had a meeting, and you had to go and play and do a paradiddle and play a little beat to be allowed to become a member of the union. And when I did and got accepted to the union, I was asked by a local musician to come and play on the following Saturday night at a dance at Sidcup Conservative Club, and that was it. For like 2 years I was just working Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, just working all the time, just playing dances and learning how to play songs. I was about 14 to 17. I was never not working. I was gigging all the time with various bands, function bands, that old kind of world of playing functions and, tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree and those kind of songs, and Motown and just anything, and just sitting there, no fills, just a small kit, just playing the songs and making money. It was great.
That is brilliant, especially at that age as well.
So
your career has been immense, but is it possible to just pick a few moments that stand out for you?
Well, I think there are certain records that I think I'm really, really proud of, and I'm generally, I think I absolutely loved the time when I first joined the Style Council, which was 1983, to like 1986, when we released 2 albums over that period, and we toured endlessly to Japan and Europe, and we went to America, and that was an absolutely amazing time. That 2.5-3 years was absolutely just sensational, and it was good after that, but that was a real kind of high. And then, I drifted away and did lots of other stuff, and then I went back and worked with Paul from 1999 to 1997, and we were playing gigs to a couple of hundred when I first started working with him in 1989, and then 1989, and by 1996 we were playing 2 nights at Finsbury Park to 40,000, and Stanley Road had sold 2 million copies, so that was like the most incredible journey. Britpop was happening, and we were playing festivals, and Glastonbury and V festivals and Phoenix festivals, and we did everything out in the green, Puckle Pops, just Tour Hoot and Verkita, all these amazing festivals. We just worked and we toured, and we just watched it. It was just kind of doing that over 7 years, which was a long time to be touring and gigging and putting out albums, but it was an amazing time, you know. And then when I finished working with Paul, I got to work with John Lorde, and that was incredible. And you know, in the meantime, I've had my own bands and playing like Trio Valore. We used to with Damon Mincello, and we did some amazing gigs in Italy, and I really loved that. You know, sort of going back and playing in clubs, and so you know, I've been really lucky. And now I've got like the Family Silver, and we're playing and doing stuff. It's all very different now, but I feel very, very lucky. You know, very blessed to be doing it.
Gosh. Yeah, and I'm coming to see you at the Family Silver on the 10th of March.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm
Can't
looking
wait.
forward to it. Because one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is how do you get in the zone for like, whether it's a small club gig, whether it's a television performance, whether it's Glastonbury or a stadium thing. Do you have like a method of kind of focusing before a gig like that, you know, to kind of bring yourself into the zone? Or
to me a gig is a gig, and I think that I tried never to get too phased when we were doing something really massive compared to doing something like a club warm-up. You've got to go on and you've got to try and give the best account that you can possibly. You don't try to play better one night than another. You try to play to the best of your abilities every single night. So you know, I took that quite seriously, and I'd have a nice kind of routine for myself where I'd like to, you know, just do a bit of practice and just warm my hands up, just a bit of sort of quiet time really, and you know, eat not too far from the gig time, you know, so I'm not sort of stuffed. I used to like going for a walk if we were playing, you know, we did a lot of touring with Paul in the UK and touring everywhere, and I'd just like to go for a 20-minute walk just to see where I am, you know, Heidelberg or Blackburn, you know, just have a walk around the theatre and just see, you know, get a bit of like local, just a taste of somewhere to say, oh, I've been there. And then, you know, as I say, nerves, I learned to control nerves, because I think once nerves gets a grip beyond a certain point, it's actually quite, you know, negative. You know, adrenaline can be negative, especially on tempos. Yeah. So, you know, that's how I tried to get into the zone. Bit of practice pad, just, you know, bit of quiet sort of reflection, cup of tea. Never drink alcohol before I play, so I don't, you know, it doesn't work for me. And then go out and just every gig is a clean sheet. See what happens.
And do you have a drink afterwards?
Oh, it's been known. Yeah, it has been known. Yeah.
I'm sure, especially possibly, in those early years.
Yeah, possibly one or two glasses of sherry.
Yes, I can, with the slippers on and the smoking jacket.
That was actually not far off the truth,
okay.
Really.
So I'm going to ask you now my kind of drum quest question, which is so interesting. What in your opinion, what defines a good drummer? What makes a good drummer? What is a good drummer to you?
A good drummer for me is somebody who I get a little an insight into their personality as a player, and as a person, as a player and as a person. That's the most important thing. You can have the most incredible technique on the drums, but no, you're not seeing into that person's kind of soul, really. They're not kind of coming across with any kind of imagination. And when you hear or see a drummer that's got that kind of personality, whether it's a big grin like a Papa Joe Jones, or that kind of manic madness of Keith Moon, which was completely genuine, you know, or sort of absolute sort of control and muscularity of a Billy Cobham, you're seeing personality in people's playing, and that's what I like. I like individuals. I like musicians, drummers that play as musicians. They play for the song. They play with taste. They play with you know, big ears. They play with openness, and they play with groove. They play with feel. You know, and an African musician who I worked with very, very early on said to me, "Imagine what it's like to have to listen to you play the drums." And I thought about that, and he said, "And if you do, think, could you dance?" And that was a very, you know, that was quite a profound sort of thing to say to a young drummer who just was kind of hitting the drums. And that's when I started to listen to people like Clyde Stubblefield and Al Jackson, and who've got just that kind of groove in their playing. And somebody else who I think has an incredible dance groove about their playing is Ringo. He's got that kind of feel. You can hear 1,000 shows in Hamburg and Liverpool in his playing, and that's what I like, that kind of dynamics and musicality.
Yeah, well, you kind of, and you've answered my question in that. Like I was going to say, who do you consider good drummers, and who? I mean, good is a, this is my quest to become a good drummer. We're talking you and these people, some of the greatest drummers. But your influences growing up, I mean, was Ringo one of them?
Absolutely. I was given a big box of singles when I was a youngster, because one of my other uncles was a disc jockey, like a proper disc jockey playing vinyl, and he used to have doubles and spares, and I got a big box of them. And I got to listen to the Beatles. There was loads of Beatles singles. There were Small Faces, the Beach Boys. So I got indirectly exposed to people like Hal Blaine, and to Kenny Jones, and to Ringo. Pete York playing with Spencer Davis, Ginger playing with Cream. All of these kind of pop rock drummers, as well as the jazz thing of discovering like Louis Bellson, Buddy Rich, and then later on people like Art Blakey and Elvin. They're just, I just hear something different every time I listen to those people, and I don't like this kind of faceless, in a room, load of GoPro cameras, look how fast I can play. It has no musical relevance to me, and it doesn't touch me at all. I take my hat off to anybody that achieves musical, technical excellence, but it's a great big leap on from acquiring a great technique to acquiring musicianship. And drummers that have the combination of the two might, someone like Brian Blade, who might just sit and play quarter notes on a ride cymbal because that's what's needed. But when he really wants to go for it, he can. And those are the kind of players that I like. I think just musicians.
Do you think, like, it was interesting you just saying about that African music. He was a drummer, right?
Yeah.
And he said, how do you, listen to yourself? How self-aware do you think drummers are? Are you self-aware of your playing? Are you critical of it? Do you know your strengths? Do people know their strengths? Do they know what is their quality and what is is their thing?
Well, I think that comes across as in terms of like music as your personality, and I think that with some of the amazing music that I got to make with like someone like Paul Weller, he has a very, very strong personality, and to a certain degree you have to have a strong personality to say, well, look, can I try this, or can I, what do you think about this? And when he trusted me, that's when the great music kind of happens. So I think it's really important to have strong opinions and a strong identity, and being self-aware. I mean, the ultimate times that you do play are kind of like zone moments where you do sort of lose yourself, And I was talking to Chad Smith about that. You just have those gigs where you just can't put a pedal wrong, and then other nights you've rested for like 12 hours and at the macrobiotic dinner, and you go out and you suck. It's a really hard thing to quantify, but you've got to be self-critical. You can't just go out there and think that'll be all right. You've got to kind of keep working at it. You've got to kind of keep your ears open. You've got to keep fresh. You've got to keep positive. The music business can be quite a harsh place, and I see sometimes where musicians get affected by the business, so that it kind of affects their music. The cynicism that creeps in about, the way music can be ran sometimes, unfortunately affects players when they play, and it's not the music, it's the business. Yeah. So you've got to separate the two.
You've said what a good drummer is to you. What advice have you got to people like me, but people of all ages, 10-year-olds or 20-year-olds or whatever age, kind of looking, they want to be a good drummer. They want to be someone that other musicians want to play with. What should they hold dear on their journey?
Well, the most important thing about something like playing the drums is to love it. You've got to love it. You've got to feel passionate about it. and you've got to enjoy it. You've got to get a sense of positivity about when you play the drums. You know, that's infectious, and that makes other people want to play with you. For me, I think understanding song structure is really, really important. And sometimes I trip myself up because I expect musicians that come for lessons that are maybe very, very technically good players to understand when I say, well, it's kind of just a Motown groove, and I get a blank stare back, and they don't really know what, you know, 4 on the floor, you know, eighth notes on the hi-hat is a kind of an eighth, is a Motown sort of feel. So be very aware of the songbook. You know, listen to great writers, listen to Bob Dylan, listen to Marvin Gaye. You know your music, and if you kind of know it, then so many times in music, just sort of getting to play with other musicians, communication and references. You know, you get together for a jam, and somebody says, oh, you know, we'll do a Nirvana tune. You know, oh, I don't know any Nirvana tunes. It's like you've got no kind of start point. And for young bands, you know, they generally start out playing covers. So it's really important to not only be a really good drummer and be able to whiz around the kit, but to be able to understand the way that a good song is actually constructed. Intro, verse, chorus, re-intro, verse, chorus, middle eight. You know, that is such a good that's such a good lesson to have under your belt, because you're connecting with other musicians and not just being the drummer.
Actually, and particularly when you're jamming, you know, knowing about song structures does help when you're just jamming and you don't know where it's going to go.
Absolutely.
Well,
you can hear things, you can sense things, and you know that probably there's going to be a resolution in a chord at a certain point, and you know, if you're communicating however you might communicate, and John Lorde used to call it the horse's eyes. I'll turn around and give you the horse's eyes, and you know, and we'd like finish. That. But communication, you know, it's so important.
I like that, the horse's eyes. I might have to use that.
The big horse's eyes, yeah. Watch for me.
Yeah. Is there anyone that you haven't worked with that you would like to? Anyone that you'd like to collaborate with that you haven't yet?
Oh, there's, you know, it's not a secret that I've got an unfeasible crush on Kate Bush, and I was devastated that I didn't get the call for her 17 nights at Hammersmith Odeon, but it was amazing, and Omar Hakim was absolutely sensational, so I forgive her. I love songwriters. I'm working with a little band in Sheffield at the moment that are coming up with some fantastic stuff, and you know, it's just good songs really. I'm not. I suppose as I've got older, I've kind of got more on personal taste to listening to jazz a lot more. I listen to a lot of Brazilian music, a lot of Brazilian funk and samba, which I really, really like. So, you know, mainstream artists. It's quite hard to look at mainstream artists after you've worked with somebody like Paul Weller. Yeah. You know, with somebody that's that, you know, prolific and that you know, that great at writing songs and singing. You're kind of looking at a lot of the stuff, because it, you know, it does go in cycles, and I'm a very positive person, but in the mainstream at the moment, you know, it's a bit sort of tired. You know, there are good bands out there. I like 21 Pilots, and I like you know, I like the Gravel Tones, who are a sort of British Australian band, and you know, there is good music out there, but in like in many things in our society, it's become quite polarized. So there's the kind of people that are doing brilliantly well at the top and making loads and loads of money and in all sorts of industries, and then there's kind of the rest of the world right kind of down the bottom, and that kind of middle ground of music has you know, it's taken a real hit. So yeah, we've got our, you know, you've got your Adeles and your Ed Sheerans, and you know, great. It's not my thing, but I wish them all very, very well. But you know, I like to hear kind of experimental stuff, and it's quite hard sometimes for young artists to get through playing stuff that's a little bit different or a little bit left wing, you know, a little bit out there. And you know, that generally is the stuff that I'd be interested in, really. But yeah, I'm a huge jazz fan. You know, for my own personal thing, I listen to a lot of Miles Davis, and I absolutely love Frank Sinatra. I think Irv Kotler, who played with Frank Sinatra, is one of the greatest drummers of all time. I just love his phrasing, and Sammy Davis, those kind of classics, and so yeah.
It's so interesting, because actually I think what with jazz drumming, what it is maybe with me is that it seems so hard and complex, but it's probably like anything that you're not used to.
Well, I think jazz, jazz drummers, have great jazz drummers have an element of taste and an element of control over the instrument that's probably, the kind of highest form of playing on the instrument. And most of the great fusion drummers, people like Vinnie Colaiuta, Billy Cobham, they can all play jazz and swing, and Steve as well. They can all play that jazz and swing, and so they have got that grounding in that kind of music. But to me, it's just the personalities. It's like, watching and listening to Art Blakey or Philly Joe Jones, and they inspire me, and I just love that kind of love that way of making music of improvisation. I think it's quite it's quite liberating to do it, and it's also really quite inspirational to listen to. So that's what I've kind of turned into. I don't listen to a lot of rock music now. I find a lot of rock quite. I've kind of done that really, and I still listen to the Beatles and songs, but I still listen to Jimi Hendrix, but sort of a lot of stuff that I don't know. I just think I've just moved on.
Well, you've done so much though. I mean, actually, this kind of brings me to my next point. Is like you've played the drums for years, so from when you were so young. Now,
loads of years.
Yeah, loads of years. Not that many years. Yeah,
it's all right. I don't mind.
No, are there still things that are you still learning? Do you still practice?
Yeah.
Do you practice? How often do you practice? What do you practice? And where do you think that you plateau, or do you look, say, in 10 years' time and think, well, that's where I could be, or that's where I want to be?
I'm at a stage in my career where I look at drummers that people like Steve Smith and Steve Gadd and David Garibaldi that are they are older than me, but I think as David Garibaldi said in an interview, he said, we just don't talk about the A word,
Yeah.
And wish him all the best with his recovery after his incident recently, because he's a monster player and one of my biggest influences. I mean, you can kind of, if you look at Steve Smith, for example, I mean, Steve is just getting better all the time, and you can see that he how hard he still works at it, and he's such an inspiration. I'd like to follow that kind of career path. I'd like to be, I don't think technically, I think that probably it's kind of split now in that there are so many young players that are following a almost like a brutal technique path that we're not going to be able to keep. I'm not going to certainly be able to keep up with those kind of players technically. My body won't be able to kind of keep up with that. But what I want to be able to do is I still want to be consistent when I go into a studio, which is my favourite thing. I still like making records. I want to be consistent. I want to be musical, and I still want to get people's feet to move.
Yeah.
I think I'd really love to be, the kind of playing that Clyde Stubblefield did, or Jabbo Starks, that kind of tight, disciplined, funky, I think funky drumming, that's the kind of thing that I really, really love. I'd love to do, that's the kind of thing I'd like to keep sort of trying to get better at, because it just makes people feel good.
I've danced a lot to records that you've had.
Then it's a win-win situation. That's all I ever wanted, to play on good records, to be able to say, one of my friends, Harbin Shrey, who lives not far from here, he said to me, when you talk about a drummer, he said, I want to know what they've played on. And when you get out, you talk about Harvey Mason, and you talk about George Benson or Chameleon, or the sort of, or Steve Gadd, and what they've played on it. There you go. That's what I've played on. And it's not just about sort of like being able to kind of bust a drum solo and demand an endorsement. There's a lot more going on to drumming than that, really.
I love it. I could talk to him all day, but I've held him up long enough. Steve, thank you so much. I'm gonna come round to prove that I am in camera, hopefully not get my head chopped off.
In sunny South London.
In sunny South London, well,
Not so sunny today.
they say that the sun's coming out. We're hoping with all these wonderful drums. Look, I'm here. So I'm going to come in here, because my head's going to be chopped off otherwise. I am here.
We're
you
here.
See? Right, can I just say, Whitey in the house. What a legend. Respect. Rock on.
Shabba.